You've seen Raiders, Star Wars, but you are about to experience a totally new dimension in entertainment.
When you see 3D glasses, you probably think of a time long forgotten, when monster movies played on massive screens outside in the woods. But did you know, or maybe even remember, that there was a 3D resurgence in the 1980s? And it all started in 1981 with a lesser-known spaghetti western called Comin' At Ya. Comin' At Ya is said to be the movie that ushered in the second wave of 3D. That movie somehow sparked a newfound interest in 3D.
The preview you are about to see is not three-dimensional. Be assured, Parasite is the most gripping and frightening movie you will ever see. And in 3D, you will be part of the terror.
Marketed as the first horror film to come out in 3D in over 20 years. Parasite is one of those movies you remember seeing in the horror section of your local video store, staring at you while you walk towards something better. But then, during that same year, a very popular horror franchise jumped into the 3D game.
Weekends are a good time to escape to the woods. Friday the 13th, Part 3, in 3D.
And suddenly, 3D was officially cool again. And we couldn't get enough of it. And then, an even bigger movie franchise got involved in the 3D fad. And it was the most glorious 3D piece of shit movie the world had ever seen. Looks so real. It was delightfully terrible. And, like most of the 3D films of the 80s, the 3D wasn't really that good. You'd watch the whole movie with those glasses on, waiting for something to pop out of the screen at you, but the movies would only have several true 3D scenes. So by the end of the movie, you were usually left with a headache, achy eyes, and pretty frustrated. Still better than Jaws the Revenge. And at least they got the title right, unlike Friday the 13th 3D. Same with another famous horror franchise that went 3D.
Amityville 3D.
Amityville Horror 3D didn't do as well at the box office as Jaws 3D or Friday the 13th 3D, but it made its money back. And anyway, there were a bunch more 3D movies to be made. Such classic 3D movies like Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin.
He who possesses this sword possesses the power of truth.
Captain EO. That was that Michael Jackson movie made for Disney World.
It's Commander Bob. No, sir, everything's under control, sir.
Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin.
A solitary warrior of great courage.
Starring Tim Thomerson. Space Hunters Adventure in the Forbidden Zone.
This is Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone. 3D.
Probably should watch that one. Tales of the Third Dimension. This was a dark humor comedy / horror movie made up of 3 short tales and introduced by a skeleton host named Igor. Huh. That sounds a bit familiar. The Man Who Wasn't There.
Now, the first 3D action comedy is here.
This is a 3D comedy film starring Steve Guttenberg about a man who accidentally takes possession of a top-secret invisibility potion while en route to his wedding and gets himself engulfed in a Russian... You know what? I've heard enough. Silent Madness.
Silent Madness.
And Treasure of the Four Crowns.
Share the ultimate modern adventure. Treasure of the Four Crows in Supervision 3D.
The biggest 3D 80s moment, even bigger than Jaws 3D and Friday the 13th 3D. It was the 1982 TV broadcast debut of The Revenge of the Creature, the sequel to The Creature of the Black Lagoon. This monumental event was marketed like crazy.
Get out your 3D glasses. The Revenge of the Creature is next here on Channel 3.
Our local 7-Eleven gave away 3D glasses with every Slurpee. Pizza Hut gave out 3D glasses. The glasses even came with instructions on how to properly view the movie. Commercials ran for a full month telling kids to get ready for the experience of a lifetime. In Chicago, the son of Svengoolie hosted a huge event around it. And I actually have a personal, kinda scary story to tell about that night. That summer evening, my family had the neighbors over to watch this special viewing. We sat around, waiting impatiently for the show to start as my mom made Jiffy Pop on the stove. Me and my friends tested out 3D glasses on commercials and some 3D mags laying around. Then suddenly, all hell broke loose. My mom yelled as an alarm went off in the kitchen, turned to see the Jiffy Pop pan on fire and flames raging from the top of the stove. We all jumped up, except for my little brother who was asleep on the couch and somehow slept through all the noise. Our one neighbor grabbed my sleeping brother and ran outside as my dad came running in from down the hall, grabbed the Jiffy Pop pan with his bare hands, and ran outside, saving the house from burning down. Most of the rest of the night was a blur. I was brought to my neighbor's house where I could see the red flashing glow of an ambulance lighting up the pine trees and street corner near my home. For a few hours, I watched with my brother out the window as we waited to hear how everyone was. The next morning, I found out that my dad got some nasty first and second degree burns on his hands. He still has the scars on his hands to this day. And through the years, they always reminded me of that night. The night my dad saved the house from burning down from a Jiffy Pop fire. After that, we ended up getting one of those fancy stand-up popcorn poppers. And it would like fill the bowl up while it popped popcorn, and you put butter on the top and it would melt onto the popcorn as it flowed through the giant popcorn blower into the bowl. 3D hung around through the 80s and into the early 90s. Freddy even got involved with Freddy Vision 3D for Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. In the end, the low quality of the films and poor 3D effects was most likely the reason 3D disappeared for another 20 years. And it's interesting to see it reappear again in a better version of the technology with movies like Avatar, but for those of us who lived through 3D fads, we all know it's just a matter of time before we all get bored with it. But for those brief moments in time when 3D pops up, it sure was exciting. Or maybe it was just the Jiffy Pop fire. So thank you for backpedaling with me. Why not leave me a like? Maybe even subscribe. See you next Saturday. I'm Tig, and you